Love one another, for love is of God. He who loves is born of God and knows God. He who does not love.
Happy Father's Day to everyone. If you are a father or a grandfather, raise your hand. Awesome. Okay. Also, Nancy wanted me to remind you ladies of the tea time in the garden this coming Saturday morning at 9:30 at our house. So just be aware of that event coming up and be prepared to participate in that great opportunity. We want to start off this morning with a reading from Proverbs 23:24. The father of a righteous child has great joy. A man who fathers a wise son rejoices in him. Being a father is difficult. There's nothing easy about being a father. We often feel inadequate for the task, especially when it seems that mothers are more emotionally hardwired to connect with children. But even in the midst of our faults and our foibles and our failures, we still can rejoice in that role of being a father. Memories of my own father, maybe memories of your father, drive us in our own attempts at fatherhood in ways we may not be aware. Some of those memories may be good, and some of them not so good. And yet, in both cases, whether we're talking about good memories or bad memories, they seem to serve as motivators for us to step up to the plate and, with God's help, attempt the most difficult job on the face of the earth. I have one memory that I want to start the lesson off with to share with you about my father. And I think that I was probably about 14 years old. And I had grown up enough that one evening I tried on some slacks that I thought they were mine. And when I put them on, I could tell they were just a little large, so they weren't mine. And when I looked down and saw cuffs and pleats in the pants, I knew they weren't mine. Mine usually were blue and had holes in them. But when my mother came in the room and she saw that I had my dad's pants on, she was amazed and she insisted that I go into the kitchen to show my dad. So I went into the kitchen. He was sitting there reading the evening paper like usual and sipping his cup or glass of sweet tea. And when I entered the doorway of the kitchen, my father saw me and he reacted in a way that I had not anticipated. I felt embarrassed because I saw my dad's lip begin to quiver. And I saw tears in his eyes. And you have to remember that I grew up in the era when big boys don't cry. And certainly dads don't cry. I mean, that was just a rule of life. But through the quivering lip and through the tear that I saw come down his cheek, he said this, and it was with a high-pitched voice. And you know what it's like if you kind of get emotional, your voice changes and it goes up an octave. So in a high-pitched voice, he goes, "This was my little boy, and now he's a young man." And he couldn't get it out. I didn't realize it then, but that was my rite of passage into my teenage years. As the oldest of 6 siblings, it was as if my father gave me permission to go ahead and grow up and take role of being the oldest sibling and taking responsibility for the other 5 that were underneath me. I want to shift here a moment and give another illustration about a friend of mine and his observation about God. And I want this observation about God to ground our direction in the the lesson that we want to talk about, the emotional life of a father, Christian fathers. This is about Craig Bowman. You don't know Craig. Craig was professor of Old Testament at Rochester College in Rochester, Michigan. Used to be Michigan Christian College. He has just retired and he's moving back to California where his family is. But if you knew Craig, he was known all over the town as a Renaissance man, multi-talented. Anything you wanted to do, anything that you wanted done, it seemed like Craig could do it. He's moving back home, and I got to personally know Craig with another minister of mine, Royce Dickinson. Royce and I would meet Craig in his office every Thursday afternoon, once a week. And with Craig, we would read sections in the Hebrew Old Testament. And in that exercise, all three of us got to know a lot about each other. Craig was almost killed on his bicycle by a car. He also inspired the entire community with his recent struggle with leukemia and a subsequent bone marrow transplant he had to endure. And those of us who knew Craig, it was hard to think that twice he was on the edge of death's door, because when we saw him and we knew him, he was an individual who was alive, with vigor. He would grab life by the throat and live it with gusto, so to speak. He was an avid swimmer, avid runner. He would ride his bicycle miles and miles. But being debilitated by life-threatening disease and having almost a life-ending accident made us appreciate how fragile life was. But in typical Bowman fashion, he fought through those dark days. And he recovered his health to the glory of God and returned to a remarkable health exercise regiment. Now, after he went through this healing and recovery, Craig said that he possessed a new understanding of God. And I want to share with you what he said. I see God as an emotional being, with emotions that exist beyond our own, one who is intimately concerned with our sufferings, who mourns with us and laments with us, as well as helps us. This in Hebrew is called chesed, sometimes translated as loving kindness. But Craig said that chesed means the illogical, loving loyalty of God. He keeps on loving when it doesn't make sense. In his retirement, Craig says this: I plan to care for my father, spend time with my youngest daughter and grandchildren, and most importantly, celebrate life. You see, God is an emotional being, and so are Christian fathers. God is emotionally invested in our emotional endeavors as a father, and that journey is difficult. We have joys, we have regrets, we've got shame, we've got guilt, anger, pride, pain, suffering. It just keeps on going. That is our experience as a father. Because we fathers are wired like we are, we have a hard time capturing in words what we feel, much less having the ability to share with others our emotional journey. I have found with a lot of young guys and men that come into my office that they don't have the vocabulary really to reach down and share what they're going through. They don't have that emotional vocabulary. I was really challenged with that many years ago when I went through graduate school and went through a course called Crisis Counseling. Most amazing course I ever went through. And the first day, and it was so funny because every one of us in the class, there were about 12 of us, we were all guys. He said, okay, since I've got all guys, we're going to do something. He said, I want you starting today, for the next 6 weeks, you've got to keep a daily emotional diary. I said, huh? A daily emotional diary? What are you talking about? And he said, you guys sitting in my class don't have the ability and you don't have the vocabulary to describe your inner world, and I'm going to teach you how to do that. Wow. Now, I still don't sometimes feel like I know how to do that, but I am so thankful for his wisdom at that point in my life, realizing how deficient we guys were in that class, so that God could work through that experience to teach us there are things that we need to share and learn how to talk about with appropriate vocabulary. You see, that is at the very heart and soul of who we are as fathers, because most of us try to do the best we know how to be a father. And I remember for a number of years there were sort of unresolved issues in my heart toward my father, until my mother one year made a comment. And have you ever been in conversation and somebody says just the right thing, and you know that is a word from God, and it's like he's taking a ball peen hammer, ding, right on top of the head. You listen to this, you need to hear this. She said this, and this was so helpful for me. Your dad did the best that he knew how. I needed to hear that. Because if we're honest, all of us at the moment, we're assuming that we're doing the best that we know how. Now, can we learn more? Oh, yeah, we can. But we're doing the best that we know how. I suspect Craig would be the first to say that suffering and being on death's door twice gave him a whole new perspective and appreciation of what it meant to be a father and what matters most. According to the Bible search that I did online, do you know there are 1,103 references to father in the Bible? Don't think we have time to go through all 1,103 this morning. You probably wouldn't hang around for all of those. Some of those are for God. Others are about incidental situations that really don't address the role of a Christian father. But I want to go back and focus on the text that I read at the beginning. The father of a righteous child has great joy. A man who fathers a wise son rejoices in him. And I want you to listen to the literal Hebrew text. It doesn't flow like it does in English. To have joy, he has joy, the father of a righteous one, and the one fathering a wise one delights in him. I want you to notice the parallelism. Joyful joy and delight pulled together. To be a father and fathering, pull those together. Righteous one and a wise one, pull those together. This is so rich, this verse, Proverbs 23:21. You see, in the ancient world, joyful delight and rejoicing was connected with being a father. In the Hebrew community, a father was revered, the role was appreciated, and its impact was recognized on the stability of home, city, town, and society. Can we bring back the joy of fatherhood? Can we claim the wisdom of Proverbs on this point? Can the stresses and strains and failures and faults, all connected with being a father today, be reconceived and appreciated in a new light? Does God really see and care about the day-to-day struggles that we have? Is it possible for fathers today to so influence their children such that they can be considered righteous and wise? What does it mean to be a righteous child? Great question. See if you agree with this. I pondered on this a lot this week. You may have a different view on this. A righteous child. It is one who begins to understand the difference fundamentally between what's right and what's wrong. One of the greatest crying needs in our young people and in our children in our nation today is to have clear guidelines for what is morally right and morally wrong. They desperately need that. A righteous child, one who begins to understand there is a loving God in the world, because they don't have to look around very far and see how unloving the world is. A righteous child. What's the next one? A wise child. Wonder what that means. A wise child perhaps is one who begins to understand the difference between choice, or the connection between choices and consequences. Maybe one who begins to learn the value of delayed gratification. You don't have to have it right now, though that's often what parents hear in a demanding voice. I gotta have it right now. So a wise child, one who begins to discern what is priority and what's not. See, a righteous child and a wise child. Those two things in ancient Hebrew community were crucial for fathers to begin to instill in their children those two characteristics. In Ephesians 5:31, Paul says, "For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, the two will become one flesh." And really, that's what fathers have to recognize, that there's a time when children will leave the nest. And your goal as a father is to prepare your children for that time. Prepare yourself for that time. When our oldest daughter left home, and those of you who are parents who have gone through this, you know how hard this is. That was the hardest time in our life. We cried all the way back from Arkansas to Michigan. And I said, I'm going to start a new ministry. And that's going to be for fathers whose children begin to leave home. And I'm going to have with me a box of Kleenex and dark sunglasses. Man, was that hard. But it was a necessary transition. In Ephesians 6:2, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise. A father teaches a son and a daughter how to honor parents that way. Ephesians 6:4, Paul gets down to brass tacks when he says, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Well, we fathers can be exasperating, can't we? Just ask our children. And we don't often mean to be, but we're human. We make mistakes. We exasperate them. When you get exasperated children, you don't have a happy home. So we have to learn how to be a father. I want to suggest, and I struggled with what I wanted to call these, 12 steps for faithful, effective, fruitful fathering. Are you ready? Number 1, listen. You need to listen to God and His Word and His Spirit within your heart and life. You need to listen to your wife because they tell you what you need to hear when you're trying to father. And number 3, you need to listen to your children. I would say that my biggest mistake as a father was through the years I did not listen enough. Learn to listen. Number 2, pray and pray often. You've got to be on your knees to be a father. Because you're going to have situations and circumstances come up, if you haven't already, and those of you who are fathers now, whose children have left home, you know what I'm talking about. Situations, there's no way under the sun that you can control them or make them different. You have to be on your knees praying and praying often. Number 3, confide in 2 other Christian fathers as your prayer partners. You cannot be a Christian father by yourself. As I was going through those tumultuous years with my 2 girls, there were a couple of guys that I really respected. And at times, there were some very needed emergency lunches. A couple times early breakfasts that I had to hear them. I wanted to bounce things off of them. I needed to hear their wisdom. And if we're in the middle of this fathering, we've got to have a couple of other fathers, prayer partners, who are there, who have been there and can support us and encourage us. Number 4, serve. And I don't mean that in the sense of you enable your children, that you're doing for them what they should be doing for themselves. Because as fathers, what we don't want is to be part of a process that produces entitled children. What we do want is to take seriously what it means to serve their needs. Number 5, encourage. I remember one year a young man coming into my office for counseling. He was so mad at his dad. And it's not that his dad was really bad and mean, not that he beat on him, he wasn't abusive, but he didn't really encourage his son. he would pick at him. He said, every time I did something, my dad never once, through all the years that I can remember, would give me a word of encouragement. He could always find that one thing that he didn't like that I did. We have to learn how to encourage, build up, because young people need that. Number 6, fill up your own well. Spiritually, emotionally, mentally. Since this is a very, very tough job, we've got to keep our heads on straight, our hearts in the right place, allowing God to fill us up so that we can be well ourselves to be a father. Number 7, and this one is so crucial. With God's help and others that you're accountable to, please manage your anger and control issues. Somehow, children have this innate sense of knowing which buttons to push that can make us fathers go through the roof. And we know that. So what we need to do is ask God to help us manage our anger and work through our control issues. Number 8, this goes along with the scripture in Ephesians 6:4. Do not exasperate your children. Don't pick at them. I know one father, his only interaction with his children, I watched it, and I thought, man, that must be tough. When he was around them, he would always pick at them. Either just physically pick at them and irritate them, or say things that he said, I'm here to get your goat. Well, if you as a father take on your role as picking at your kids and get their goat, how in the world do you think they're going to grow up as a responsible adult? So we do not exasperate our children. Number 9, come with your children to Sunday school, Awana, Bible study, Sunday morning assembly. Don't you dare just take them, drop them off, and leave. Do you hear me? We've had too many fathers generationally say, well, I'm kind of interested in my kids' spiritual development. They'll come and just drop them off to something that not even be interested. What message do you think that's sending to children? We've got to do better than that. And I see signs of a lot of young fathers recognizing that, and they are doing better. And I'm excited about what I'm seeing there. Number 10, recognize your own power of example. Our kids are like a sponge, and they're going to soak up as what is normal based on what they see in us. If there's something about you that you don't like, and you're struggling with it, all of a sudden it becomes something you really don't like when you see your children picking up on it. It's like your own faults are magnified. So recognize your power of example, what you say, your attitudes, how you relate to others, what you do as a Christian. Number 11, remember the commitment of your specific stewardship, that God has given you a little soul to care in your hands. I tell you what, we fathers would be a little more attentive to our role if every day we were made to carry around a fragile egg in our hands like this with our child's name written on it. You would take that role a lot more seriously, wouldn't you? Because you know how easy it is to break an egg. That's what God has given us, the stewardship of that soul. What are we going to do with it? Are we going to be careless with it and drop it? Or toss it and hope somebody else will catch it? You know, some fathers do that. Then number 12, discipline appropriately. Always on the same page with your wife and the child's mother. Now these 12 things that I've mentioned, they're not guarantees of any product. But these are suggestions so that while you're fathering and you're being a father, you can once again rejoice and find great joy in the midst of that roller coaster ride. Hang on tight for the ride of your life, because God can give you faith and courage and perseverance, and this is the greatest job in the world, more than any other job you could sign up for, because you are preparing your children to be part of the next generation of people who have faith, people who will begin their own families, people who can honor God. And I guess one of the things I'm trying to say this morning is, please don't underestimate your role as a father. Yes, we make mistakes. Yes, we are human. But God in His divine wisdom still wants us to step up to the plate in our humanity and make a difference with that kind of commitment. Maybe this morning you're a father who needs support in that role. Maybe you have felt like you've just failed. Well, we all know that feeling, don't we? If you need prayer this morning, specifically in that role, and we can pray for you and encourage you because you are now recommitting in your heart and your life the desire to be the kind of man that God needs for the spread of the kingdom in this world. And you know your family needs you. And you want to be that person. If we can help you in any way, won't you come while we stand and sing this morning?
No.